Alright guys, we're going to look at the first of the 3 Polaroid pack cameras I own. And this is the original, the Polaroid Model 100. Though it's not fully original, I've done a few modifications to it, which I'll talk about. So in my opinion, this is probably one of the best series to get because it's the most compact and still has some great features. Now it has this nice cover to conceal the front. To open it, you simply lift it, it's on magnets, and then flip it down. It stays attached to the camera. But if you want to remove it, there's a little metal clasp right here that you push, and then you can lift it off. So you don't have to carry this around if you don't want. But what is nice about this front cover is that the manual is held in here. And what I do is I also keep a few pieces of wax paper. And then if I've taken images that are not completely dry, I'll interleave them in pages of the manual with the wax paper. And the manual actually has wax-coated pages. And so between the wax paper and the wax manual, it's a good way to store a few photos without having to deal with some other method to store your photos while walking around. Now onto the camera itself. This, if you have seen a Polaroid 100 before, you'll already realize that there's something wrong here. This is the viewfinder off of the 250, the 350, and the 450 camera. It's the best viewfinder out of the series, so I got a broken 250 and exchanged the kind of crappier rangefinder in this camera with the fancier rangefinder system. These were actually made by Carl Zeiss, which is pretty cool. And they're interchangeable. The mounting system is the same for the crappier and the better rangefinder. So to open the camera, there's this lever with an arrow on it right here. Let me zoom in. And all you have to do is push up and then grab the whole face of the camera and lift it out. And it'll click when it's all the way out. So that's how you do that. Now, this was, kind of a professional model because it has a good focusing system and a fairly excellent lens. But they put numbers on everything still to try to make it easier for the user. So you can see right here, there's a number 1. And what that means is first you focus the camera, and to focus you simply, there's 2 of these buttons, one on each side, and you simply put your index fingers on them and push back and forth, and you can see that's actually focusing the front lens piece there. And at the same time, this is a rangefinder camera, so just like I've talked about before the rangefinders, you just look through this window and you'll see your 2 images line up, and then you can take your photo. And so obviously taking your photo is number 2, so the shutter button actually has number 2 on it. And then number 3 is to recock the shutter. So you have to push number 3 lever down to prepare the shutter. And obviously they wanted you to have this camera ready to go right away. So this is step 3, so that then even when you pack away the camera, the shutter is still cocked, and the next time you bring it out, you don't forget to cock it. But of course you can do it in whatever order you please. I just leave it uncocked and just remember to cock it before taking my photo. Next, if we look at the front of the camera, we have some controls. The first control is around the lens. There is a classic Polaroid light and darken, just like on these cameras. There is the light and darken under the lens. And because the light sensors in these are, 50 years old maybe, in general, mine has been kept on lighten by a little bit. Of course, when you get your camera, you'll have to except that you'll have to waste the first few shots to get this light and darken adjusted just right. I mean, these are old cameras with old electronics, so you just have to be prepared to do some experimentation to learn what exactly are the foils of your specific camera. Down here is where you select, let me zoom in on that. Down here is where you select the film speed. It's set on 75, and you can choose 3000, 300, 150, and 75. What's really interesting is if you read the manual for this camera, it says that the 300 and the 150 are for films that Polaroid has not yet invented but may come out with in the future. And they never actually came out with it. All their films were pretty much either 3000 or 75, except for a few specialty films. And of course the Fujifilm is 100, not 75. But don't worry yourself by that too much. I just set it at 75 for the 100 ISO film, and you adjust otherwise with the light and darken. And so here you can see the lighten and darken up close. Another good tip with these cameras is particularly with this Polaroid 100, 200, 300, and 400 series land cameras. This is actually just setting your aperture, and you can see that in the lens. So the 3000 setting literally just has a tiny little aperture in there, and the 75 has the widest aperture. And of course I like the widest aperture because then you can actually get a little bit of a depth of field on these cameras when you focus on something close. It really shows off how nice this lens is. So again, my tip is if you're shooting the 100 speed film, just put this on 75. Don't try to, use the 150 occasionally. It just seems to work fine with the 75. The final kind of exposure control is this blue switch here, which is also actually an aperture switch. You can see here. And what this blue switch does is on the top, there's this chart on the top, which allows you to switch kind of if you're using the camera outdoors or indoors, or some weird combination of them based on obviously what you can read on this chart. So next on the camera, I'm going to tell you how to close it, and I'm going to stay zoomed in because if you can see here on this strut that holds the bellows out, it says press here to close. So you simply lightly press down here, and then you push back on the front of the camera. That releases a little latch. So that's how you close it. Next, let's talk about the flash. You can see here on the side of the, let me unfold it again. This side of the camera, there's a standard PC socket. So, of course, you can plug your flashes that use a PC socket right into there. Now, there's some worry about whether this actually works because there's a PC socket. What's this weird socket above it? Well, if I were to take my official flash gun for this camera, which I have used, and yes, it uses flash bulbs and it works great. You can see the official Polaroid flash. It has the PC socket, but then it has this little tab that inserts into this slot on the camera. And what that actually does is it actually reveals more of the light sensor. There's a little shield inside the light sensor. This is the light sensor window. And when you put this special connector into the camera, it actually reveals the light sensor. So this camera basically has automatic flash. The flash fires, the light sensor, while the exposure is happening, figures out how much light your subject is getting, and then when it gets enough light, it closes the shutter, even before the flash is done firing. So it's actually quite advanced. But, of course, most of us don't want to be shooting flash bulbs. So what do you do instead? Well, your standard electronic flash will actually probably work just fine, just with a little tweaking. I highly recommend, if you're going to be using an electronic flash, you get one that has the settings on it. So the flash itself has its own little light sensor on the front. And this is what I highly recommend, because then you don't have to worry about this light sensor trying to figure out the electronic flash. You simply use the chart on the back of here, and you figure out, you know, with this little dial, what your film speed is. So about 100 ISO. And then you look at what settings you need to achieve that, and you go from there. I think that's a much better way to do it. There's a few places online where you can try to guess what the aperture of this lens is. I basically assume this is about an f12 lens at the 75 ISO setting, because remember, this ISO setting is actually the aperture setting. And that's what I do, and it works great. Of course, you're going to need some sort of adapter, which I found here on eBay, because this camera doesn't mount flashes the normal way. You can see here with the flash gun, they snap on the top of the camera. They actually snap between these two pieces of this metal band. So it goes on like that. So I found this cool little adapter on eBay, which has a normal hot shoe on the top and this adapter on the bottom. Yeah. There you go. So that's pretty much all I need to know about the flash. The final thing to talk about with this camera is the battery. Now, unfortunately, these originally took a special battery called a 531, which looks kind of like a big, I don't know, it looks like an extra long AA battery, but it has 9-volt battery terminals on each end. Of course, you can't find those anymore. So if you're going to get one of these cameras, actually some places, some specialty battery places may still have that battery. So if you're just starting out with this camera, of course you can just find the specialty battery. But you can also modify it to use double or AAAs. Here you see I've just taken a 4 AAA battery holder, shorted one of the terminals, and then put 3 AAAs in the others. And then I had to kind of unscrew some of the stuff in here for this to fit. And it was kind of a pain in the butt, but I think it's well worth it to get off of the specialty batteries. Even though the batteries in this thing last a long time, I don't know how much longer those specialty batteries are going to be manufactured. So this is another good option. Also to note, some of these cameras take only 2 batteries. Some of the older ones require the 4.5 volt battery, and some of the newer ones need only a 3 volt battery. So it's definitely a lot easier to fit two AAAs in here than 3. So I'm not sure off the top of my head which ones take the 2 instead of the 3. I think the 250, the 350, and the 450 take them. Anyways, what I mean by that is there are a ton of these made. There's basically 4 series. There's the 100 series, 200 series, 300 series, 400 series. And within each series, the 50 was the highest end. So the 250, the 350, and the 450 were the high-end ones. And then the 240, the 340, and the 440 were, you know, still high-end, but they didn't have some cool gimmick. And then it goes down from there. There's the, you know, 220, 320, 420, and then the 210, 310, and 410, which were the really cheap ones that didn't even have a rangefinder, from what I remember. There are some good websites though where you can look up all the different models, and I'll link those down in the description. So that's about it about the Polaroid 100 Automatic Land Camera. Stay tuned for the next video where I talk about the really cheap one, which is the Polaroid Color Pack cameras.